Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack. Welcome back to Right Pack Radio. This is your host, David Allen Lucas, writer of science fiction, mystery, horror, and poetry. And today we are going to talk about the schools of mystery, as well as the tropes and the clichés. With me today is
your co-host, Kathleen Kayembe. I write GLBT fiction under Kaseka and Vita, and I think magic is awesome.
Fedora Amos. I wrote Jack the Ripper in St. Louis. It is set in 1897 St. Louis and shows us that there were mean streets back then too, and that's one of the basic things you have to have for mystery.
I'm Jennifer Stolzer. I'm a fantasy author and illustrator, although I draw more than just fantasy. I draw just about anything.
Yes, including some of my characters. Thank you.
I love characters.
And our logo.
And our logo.
Yeah, I'm Melanie Claney. I write science fiction, fantasy, and nonfiction.
Let's talk about, a few episodes ago, we talked about the tropes of science fiction and fantasy, and really before I get started, let me stop myself and say, Fedora, we have a special happy birthday today, don't we?
Oh, we do. And I'm very pleased to bring in some cupcakes for the team today. Woo! Because we're celebrating a birthday of a wonderful writer named Dashiell Hammett. This is his 120th birthday. Happy birthday to you, Dashiell. Do you want to sing? Shall we sing?
Oh, everybody, we would no longer have any listeners after I sing.
We'd also have to pay royalties.
Okay.
Is Dashiell going to blow out the candles?
After 120 years, I don't think so.
Many happy returns on your 120th birthday.
For our listeners, this is being recorded on May, what day is it?
25th.
I apologize to our listeners. I've been going crazy the last several days with my bill pay job. And for those who don't know who he is, first off, shame on you. And second off, obviously you have never read hard-boiled detectives or a hard-boiled mystery. One which was made into a book, made one of his books into a movie is The Maltese Falcon. Also, too, if I remember right, didn't he do The Whistler?
No.
Oh, Thin Man.
The Thin Man series.
Yeah.
The Thin Man itself is the only novel that he wrote, but then he was in Hollywood and actually did the screenplays for the other 5 Thin Man movies. And so that was his main claim to financial success.
So a novelist and a screenwriter.
Absolutely.
Yes. I didn't realize that.
As well as a story writer. Well, he only wrote actually 5 novels that were published, but some 80 stories, and did many, many screenplays, including all of those for The Thin Man, with help.
And I want to check something real fast here. Thank God for computers. If I remember right, he also had one of the best backgrounds for writing mysteries. Come on.
Yes, he was a Pinkerton.
He was a farmer. Thank you. That's what's double checking my facts. He was a Pinkerton.
What is a Pinkerton?
Thank you for asking.
You're welcome.
The
Please tell me.
Pinkerton Agency, which was started in the 1800s, was America's first private eye firm. In fact, they provided security for Abraham Lincoln and eventually formed the Secret Service.
Question.
Answer.
Abraham Lincoln's security team was these Pinkerton people?
Uh-huh.
I feel like that's not something they should be advertising as something that they did well.
Well, that was actually they did during the war.
Oh, okay.
And then also too, they were our intelligence agency gatherer. In other words, they sent their people across the lines to investigate what's going on with Confederates, to be spies, basically.
So they were the pro-runners of the CIA, too.
They are the pro-runners of the CIA, and before you do, they also investigated all the train robberies and all that stuff of the old Wild West. The sleeping eye is related to the private eye, is where the Pinkertons come from.
So does the
Or never sleeping eye, I'm sorry.
the Pink Panther Does that have anything to do with it?
No.
Why is the Pink
But
Panther named
another
Pink Panther?
great detective from fictional writings.
And that's from fictional.
Yes.
With a humorous twist to be sure.
Yes.
Indeed.
Okay, and with that, now we go into the mystery field. And Dashiell wasn't the only private eye to turn mystery writer. There have been several other sectors, ones that are currently writing right now. But what do you guys consider to be some of the cliches, tropes of mystery writers, of mysteries and
Mystery
thrillers?
stories. Yeah.
A crime has happened. There has been a crime.
Well, that's a definition.
Yeah, but usually,
trying
but
to
not
solve it.
always a murder. But it doesn't have to be murder, but it's almost always a
It's
murder.
often a murder.
Yeah.
A body does help.
Yes.
If it's a theft, it's something really particular.
And not only that, but there usually is a death involved later in the book. That's another trope.
To cover it up.
Death is a great dramatic vehicle.
To borrow, I think, from P.D. James, Phyllis Dorothy James, who is the current queen of crime over in Britain, inherited from Agatha Christie.
Who I love.
As she said, and I don't have the exact quote, so I'm gonna paraphrase it. People may care about stealing Aunt Gertrude's pearl necklace, but they're going to care more about Aunt Gertrude coming up dead.
Yes.
Okay. Speaking of Agatha Christie, I don't know if she invented or was just the inspiration for the cozy, which is one of the tropes of mystery writing.
Can we go
Cozy
into those
mysteries?
subsets?
Yes. So the cozy, which is one of the ones I know. If I get it wrong, please someone correct me.
You will, we will.
A cozy is there's a murder. There's a limited group of suspects that you are introduced to fairly quickly. It's in a contained environment usually. I don't know if that's part of the trope or just something that's often done. And it's usually not, let's just say it's not too gritty. And there's always a nice clean resolution in the bad guy. The bad guy is always caught. Again, I don't know if it's part of the convention or just often happens that an innocent person is often suspected first.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because I think there are two schools for the traditional mystery, really. And one is the Agatha Christie school. And what she does, interestingly, way more than I could, I do believe, is to give us clear suspects, a lot of clear suspects. Mm-hmm. And the one that turns out to be the killer more often than not is the one that you ought to suspect from the very beginning. But she has twisted it so that you can't tell it. And that is delightful, don't you think?
Yeah, but if you go back and read it again, you will see the clues that you may have missed completely the first time.
In writing mysteries, we actually have to follow a set of rules to the game, if you will, especially the whodunits, which I'm not that good at writing whodunits. I do the howdunits more, or how catch'ems. But in the whodunits, you have to have all your clues up front. You can't hide them from the people, from your reader. You've got to treat your reader intelligently. Mm-hmm. Don't have somebody suddenly come in at the last minute and be either the one who did it, or have someone be the sudden Superman solver of the case.
But wait a minute. It can look like they're a Superman. They can be Sherlock Holmes. But when you have to go back, the reader has to realize they missed the clues that Superman picked up on.
That's what I'm saying. They're backed up.
Yeah.
They're in the story. You can't just if I'm writing a 20-chapter novel, and chapter 20 is where I'm going to have all of my clues and my bad guy's caught, and my bad guy shows up in chapter 20, and here comes the guy who's able to solve it. That's a really bad mystery. It's got to be interwoven throughout the story.
I can give an example of that, but Jennifer's going to have to tell me the title because I don't remember. What was the movie that had it was a parody of like everything?
It was
ever.
Murder by Death, which is a fantastic movie I recommend to both mystery fans and not mystery fans. If you're a fan of classic mystery novels, you'll love it to a second degree because every character in that movie is a likeness of a different famous fictional.
Yes.
There's a Hercule Poirot, there's a Sherlock Holmes-ish sort of thing, there's an Agatha Christie style.
That's Miss Marple.
Miss Marple.
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 There are murders. It's a closed
And
Place.
it's there to kind of capitalize on the tropes and the different things that happen, and the ending is specifically to kind of make fun of what you just mentioned. You know, you're not supposed to introduce all these clues in the last 3 seconds of the mystery.
It was awesome.
It was lots of fun.
You know what? Let's before we, as we're digging into tropes and we're talking about different schools, let's go ahead and cover the different subgenres of mystery.
Okay, so we have cozy.
We have the cozies. We have a whodunits, which usually
A cozy is usually a
be a cozy,
subcategory of
yeah.
whodunit.
but it can cross over. You've got the hard-boiled detective. You have, which is your grittier story.
Would that be a
But-
noir style?
That's
kind of
my
thing?
question.
Noir is another way of saying hard-boiled.
And that can be a whodunit also.
Yeah.
Question. For
Okay.
noir style, the way I typically think of noir endings is I'm going to be crying in a corner for 3 years from now because that justice was not served and it was rubbed in my face.
Not necessarily.
Justice not necessarily was served. It's the way justice was served. It's justice may have been served in the end, but it really doesn't feel like
You feel cheated.
That-
Something's wrong.
the
Personal
world doesn't
experience
return to
talking.
normal.
Chinatown?
The world doesn't necessarily return to normal.
No, I think that you'll find justice in most noir novels, if
Yes,
that's what
very
you're
much so.
talking about. I think you're talking about perhaps something that is a little different from that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the great noir movies like DOA, Dead on Arrival, he's dead, but then so is everybody else, you know.
In Spencer, in the old
And,
Spencer for Hire books, as well as TV shows, if I can remember the TV shows. It's been a long time since I've seen any of those, and I can't find them. Which, by the way, if anybody who ever listens is from the company who owns the rights to Spencer for Hire TV shows, please release them on DVD. Get with the program.
Or even streaming.
You know, even streaming.
Yeah.
But anyway,
put 'em on
usually the
YouTube.
bad guy ends up dead, shot and killed in a noir. And noir actually is really a film title versus a novel title, but it originally.
It's true.
Now-
I do
now
think
it's
of a
in the middle.
visual style when
Right.
you mention noir. That's why I guess hard-boiled is a better term for mystery
Yeah.
books.
Yeah. That's what I
And
was-
mystery, again, when you're reading Hard Boiled, it's not that they have an unhappy ending, it's that they could have an unhappy ending. Cozies always have a happy ending.
Well, they get justice.
I associated
They try-
noir with
Get caught.
the,
We'll say
the
caught.
emotional turmoil bit. Hard-boiled
And we're
is more the hard-talking detective who is out in this gritty world, and
It's the jaded. It's really
Yes.
the jaded, jagged character, broken hero type story. And Hardboiled really is an American creation as
Well,
a type of mystery.
Let's go back to Dashiell Hammett for a moment.
Okay,
It was the
actually,
granddaddy
I'm
of all
gonna-
of them.
I'm going to hold you. Then I'm just going to quickly run through the remainder, and then I want to come back to that.
Okay.
Yeah, we want to give you the floor.
Yeah, we're going to give you the floor on this. But real quick, you have the social political mysteries that's written by P.D. James, for example, that deals more with society. You have the courtroom dramas. There's good Earl Stanley Gardner, Scott Turow.
Perry Mason.
Well, that's Earl Stanley Gardner.
Okay.
And I'm David Balducci, I believe, wrote those as well. You've got the thriller, which may or may not be an actual mystery. You have the howdunnits, or the whodunit. I'm sorry, the howcatchems.
How catch 'em.
The howcatchems, perfect example, old trope, Columbo. He walks on the scene, he knows who did it, is how's he going to catch this guy?
Columbo's a class act.
Columbo's a class act. You also have, and I got to meet him before he passed away, the guy who invented these, which is the police procedural. And that was created by, the real name was Evan Hunter, his pen name was Ed McBain. And that dealt more with the procedure of crime, or the procedure of the police investigation, more than it dealt with any of the other things we've talked about.
Very popular on television nowadays.
question,
Exactly.
wait, what was his name so I can write that down and then be very happy?
Ed McBain, McBain, is his pen name. He also wrote underneath his real name too, as Evan Hunter.
What are some of the examples of what he wrote?
I never remember the name of the
No.
number of the precinct. Let's see here. Hail to Achieve. What was it? Something Precinct Mysteries. 80s, 89th, 82nd, 80th. I'd have to look this up. You would catch me with that. But really, he was the beginning, if you will, to to programs that we see now, like Law and Order, or the order side, the law side of it, where law enforcement people are out there. All of the police procedurals that came out started basically with him. Now let's go back to hardboileds.
Okay. Well, Dashiell Hammett was the granddaddy of the hardboiled, and probably none is a better example than Sam Spade.
Mm-hmm.
And that created its own set of cliches, because Sam Spade not only is a rugged, hard-drinking man, he also has his own set of conscience-driven standards that he lives by. And they may not be the same standards that anybody else has, but when Miles Archer, his partner, is killed, he knows Miles is not such a nice guy. He's a chaser and not real smart when you get right down to it, but he's your partner. And when your partner dies, you have to do something about it.
Mm-hmm. He's got a code.
He has a code. And we find, I think, that same thing in virtually all hard-boiled. Yeah. It's not the same code, but it is a code, and it may be hard for us to follow and understand, but it's there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh. A couple other characters that you'd recognize. Philip Marlowe was also hard-boiled. Originally, Perry Mason, though it is a whodunit and more of a courtroom drama, is actually, he started off as hard-boiled in the books. I don't remember if it was the case on the audio dramas or not before we ever saw video. And there's another, I can't think of this guy's name. It was started off as books, became a TV show in the 50s, and it was really gritty, especially for the 50s. Got canceled eventually and came back in the 80s. And now, I can't believe I can't remember.
Sounds like.
Teen Spirit?
I'm going to have to look it up. Which I'm glad on my computer today. Go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering what if there's another trope or whatever for the, how do I say this, villain-centric mysteries. Where
those are crime novels.
Okay.
Which I didn't, thank you for saying those, because I forgot to include, where the novel is not so much about catching actually I did say them in a way, it's a howdunit. It is, how are they going to commit the crime? It's the criminal is the actual quote-unquote protagonist or hero of the story. Actually, in a way, Pink Panther was brought up earlier. That is, in a way, falls into it. A lot of the other novels that fall into it, Elmore Leonard's Get Shorty would fall into the
Ocean's movies.
Pulp Fiction. Go ahead.
Is that still considered a mystery novel if it's more of an adventure with a criminal?
I would say.
It's an adventure with a criminal, but still falls into the mystery genres.
So someone who wrote a criminal novel, a crime novel, would still be welcome at like a mystery convention or something like that. You would find more information on those kind of books in mystery circles.
Actually, I remember an Agatha Christie story that I can't think of the name of. It's a short story, but it is a whodunit. But it turns out your point of view character is the murderer. But because of the way she wrote it, you don't realize that.
Maybe it's good that you don't remember the title. So
yeah.
That's the danger with talking about all these mystery stories, is that we're spoiling all the mysteries.
Yeah.
And I don't remember his name. This one gentleman, as far as I know, he never wrote novels. He did short stories only in the Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine until the day he died. He had an ongoing series where it was about a burglar who would steal stuff, but he always would steal kind of like a Robin Hood type character. And it was a mystery.
The sympathetic thief is one of the cliches of mysteries.
Yes. So let's talk about the cliches. And good, I finally found Evan Hunter's information. If I can find the story. Anyway, what are some of the cliches of mystery? In the cozies, I'm going to pick on Angela Lansbury and Agatha Christie for a moment. Murder, She Wrote, or Miss Marple, where is an elderly lady, somebody who may have not had any training whatsoever in criminal investigation.
The amateur detective.
The amateur detective who is from some small town, which the murder count is bigger than the population by the time you get done with the series. Go ahead.
I do enjoy, in Miss Marple, people from out of town and like the younger folk, all of us young people who come and see her are thinking, oh, she's just just an old lady. What does she know about the world? Things are dark. There's a murder. Hide it from her. And she can get into the minds of criminals. Like, she is so much more knowledgeable than all of them, despite not having really left town very much.
The secret,
Yeah. She's like, I know people.
Yeah. The specialized knowledge, which in a way is kind of a subset of what Sherlock Holmes is. He has
Sherlockian.
It's a very different type of subspecialty of knowledge than Sherlock.
I think one key trope, if you'd care to call it that, is the sidekick.
Oh, yeah.
That you often need a sidekick,
A Dr. Watson.
a Dr. Watson, to explain things to everybody else who isn't as smart.
Oh, and the
as
sidekick
Watson.
is often the narrator. Not always, but often.
Well, he's
Often.
the fish out of water protagonist who's watching the master at work.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's good to have
And the
him
master has
along.
to explain it to him, and thereby explain it to us.
Exactly.
It also helps maintain the mystery for readers, because if you know exactly how it's done, it's not always as cool. Like, sometimes you just want to see it as magic and then see behind the curtain.
Yeah, so I'm going to bungle his name. So
Hercule
Poirot.
Poirot.
Thank you. Can solve the mystery, and what's his name? Higgins or whatever can be confused about it, and then it has to be explained to him.
A modern day, not some of the cozies, but a modern day trope
Hastings.
that's occurring.
It's Hastings.
Yeah.
Modern day trope that's occurring now, thanks to CSI. And I need to step back a little bit before I start this. In criminal investigation, there's really 3 eyes to every criminal investigation in real life: the interrogation, the instrumentation, and the information. CSI in that focuses on the instrumentation aspect of criminal investigation, as if that is the only way to solve the crime. And in truth, a lot of times the detective takes a lot of sweat, tears, hard work on their feet to really solve a real crime in real life. And with that trope comes along into the other genres, the instantaneous ballistics, toxicology, forensic report. By the time they've just left the crime scene, blood samples have been taken, and by the time they arrive, even if it's the next day at the police station, they have all these reports.
That happens more in TV and movies, but that's also a problem in books.
Yes,
I do
it is.
like Almost Human, though, because they had androids who would do all that themselves at the scene. So I'm like, okay, I can see that.
Another, in another video game, well, I said another, we haven't spoken on video games yet. Video game that came out recently for the PS4, Heavy Rain, last couple years. It's a police procedural
cool.
game. Pretty cool. The way they solved that was they gave our detective character magic eyeglasses and a power glove that let him just find evidence and tell you what it is.
And see, a lot of times
And it
that's
was more
what.
realistic because you knew that was a thing. It was real. And
It was
didn't
more
have to
realistic
actually-
because it also gave him a drug addiction.
Oh.
So he got a chance to be hard-boiled in that way.
Thank you. There's another trope. The addicted detective.
He's seen too much.
The detective who has seen too much and has alcoholism or other addiction, or even the subcategory of that is the former alcoholic detective who now runs into something so hard that he ends up becoming an alcoholic again.
Does Holmes count as a as a kind of this? Because
Yes.
he's bored.
It starts with that.
When he's
He's
bored,
a start.
he does not do nice things to his body.
The beginning of mystery actually occurs with Edgar Allan Poe. And then I call him the grandfather of mystery. The father of mystery is Arthur Conan Doyle. And
Oh, no. I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No. I think it goes back much earlier than that.
Okay.
And we'll tell you all about it if you want
okay,
to.
yeah, we'll talk about history in a minute. But where I was going is that with Sherlock Holmes, he has got a heroin addiction.
Yeah, heroin addiction.
I ran that, double checked that in my head real fast. Heroin
Cocaine.
And
addiction.
tobacco, but
And
that
tobacco.
wasn't considered
No, it's
too
cocaine.
bad.
And cocaine.
No, it's cocaine, not heroin.
All right, you're right. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah,
That's
that's a
7%
much.
solution.
Yeah, so yeah,
Cocaine.
cocaine definitely.
Thank you. I knew I was making an error.
We all-
Now that we've pinned down what drug he was using,
Yeah.
And we all 100% agreed with the wrong one, like we knew what we were talking about.
But
Well,
right,
the thing with cocaine is he was taking it as a stimulant, and heroin wouldn't work too well for
because he was
that.
bored.
But if
Yes.
you read through the entire series of the short stories and novella that was written by Conan Doyle, Watson eventually gets Holmes off the drug and off the addiction. and it's a hard fight. And I think as a doctor, he was putting that forward.
Yeah.
But that is an example of where I think the trope starts.
Not that far yet. Sorry, I was silently shaking my fist at David, but now you know.
Oh,
All right, so give us
earlier.
Give us
Earlier.
the
Yes.
earlier.
Well, I could go back, a very long way and say, let's start just at where people began to read a lot, and there was a demand for newspapers and books, which is where these stories were in the 1800s. Before that time, when there were the sort of middle class arose, it was all oral and about heroes and nationalism mostly. But when you talk about things that were written down, we're talking about the 1800s, and the earlier ones, which often had mysteries in them, like George Eliot's Silas Marner, but were very moral. And so it had a mystery, but mostly it was a moralistic kind of story. The actual mystery story, I think, starts with Poe, when it's there for the mystery itself and no other reason. And so you have his Tales of Ratiocination, you have Murders in the Rue Morgue, The Purloined Letter, The Gold Bug, which are all detective stories, basically. So that's where they begin.
When was Jack the Ripper?
1888.
Yeah, does that timing, with them and the forming of Scotland Yard and everything, have anything to do with when mysteries just exploded?
Like true crime turning into
where
mystery
crime is the
writing.
focus,
I don't know if it dealt with it or not, but what's interesting is that Conan Doyle started writing Holmes before Jack the Ripper came out.
In
He
a
was
way,
writing it contemporary too.
Jack the Ripper, in a way, is sort of like a fictional character because he was a sensationalized character. They gave him a name, and he was a character people read about in newspapers or whatever.
Jack the Ripper was probably the first true crime. It wasn't a novel, but it was like the first true crime novel type thing.
We have a Jack the Ripper expert sitting at the table with us.
I think, though, there was a program on Sherlock Holmes and on Scotland Yard, actually, that said that up until Jack the Ripper, people, police officers weren't supposed to investigate crimes. They were supposed to, deal with the aftermath.
A lot of times that was the case. You're right.
That was their official
They really
purpose.
didn't, in general, see themselves as solving crimes at all.
Yeah.
They were to keep the peace. That was their job.
It was
They
their
were to keep
after
the
that-
peace.
After that, it became
much more so.
But
into crime prevention.
the Bow Street Runners were they were the forerunners of a professional police force. They came before that. They were sort of a semi.
Who are these people who I've not heard of?
While we're at it, let's talk about the 1800s since we're stuck there on the tropes.
Okay, but Bow Street Runners were kind of they weren't quite police officers, but they were a little bit more than private detectives. They could, they preceded the official police force in London. I don't know if they go beyond that. But the point is, if they could get evidence of a crime, then they could get a judge to come and, issue a warrant and come drag you off to jail and get you hanged. But they didn't actually have quite as much authority to investigate. So, for instance, a rich person that committed a murder, for instance, could probably keep them from investigating.
Can we talk about that, too? As part of, one of the tropes in mysteries?
But the thing is,
the hampering of the...
Yeah, but the other thing is the Bow Street Runners, they did those types of crimes, but they were working for pay, too. So, for instance, if, again, a rich person, they were robbed, they could hire the Bow Street Runners to go find their jewelry or whatever was robbed, and then the Bow Street Runner would get a reward for finding it. So these were, like I said, it's sort of a combination of private detective, police force. They were the proto-police.
Okay.
I think you're quite right that the Ripper case and also a growth of mysteries earlier than that did a lot to create interest in crime and solving crime because it scared people to death. Mm-hmm. And so there were many places across the world which were trying to do something about it. In France, for example, a man developed the Bertillon system. He was just a clerk, but he decided that you could prevent crime if you could find out enough about the criminal type, because they believed in a criminal type. And so he did 14
eugenics.
different measurements, including the measurements of the middle finger and the measurements of the nose, to try to figure out what a real criminal looked like, because I thought you could tell by what they look like.
Because normal
And-
people never do anything wrong.
the St. Louis in 1897 adopted the Bertillon system
Really?
right here.
So profiling as early as that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
those-
the long knows you're evil.
Absolutely.
As I try and bring this up, in the 1800s, you had a lot of things occurring. The French were the first to come up with a police force. Police forces, as we think of them today, did not exist until then. So that's kind of scary how many centuries of human history.
No question, were there sheriffs before then?
Sheriffs, yes, but that was not police.
They were collecting taxes more than anything else.
Exactly.
The sheriffs were.
They were more tax collectors. They were more working for the court and so forth. Before and
What about the
in
marshals? When did, like in the U.S., when were there? When they?
1800s as well, I
Okay.
believe. I had to look at the time. In France, in 1833, you see the birth of the private detective. A lot of your early techniques of criminal investigation came out of the birth of the police and the birth of the private detectives, even before Pinkerton ever came around. And a lot of that's where we get our modern day stuff. The mysteries coming out of that, in the 1800s, you've got to switch from the agricultural age, if you will, to the industrial age occurring. You've got
The rise of the city.
The rise of the city. You've got the rise of crime. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that if you want to put an actual place of beginning of full-length mysteries, or what we would think of as full-length mysteries, I think you have to place that with Wilkie Collins, a Brit, and his two most important books, The Moonstone and The Woman in White, are still considered among the top 100 mysteries of all time.
I love the history lesson because I don't know history of mysteries.
The history of mystery.
Exactly, and I'm learning things. But I would like to steer us back toward tropes, cliches. Is there like a mystery everybody's familiar with, or at least you, Fedora, are familiar with, that like you could deconstruct for us? You and David and Melanie
Well,
and Jen.
how about let's talk
Just
about
like
the trope characters. That might make it easier.
Yeah, I just want to go through something
Yeah.
and be like this and this.
How about the femme fatale? Now, there's also the male seducer too, but that's much more rare of a character.
No, I think what Kathleen is saying, let's choose a story and
Yeah.
then go through all the tropes of it.
Yeah, a specific.
Let's see, something that's either very classic or
That's
something
where I'm
that's
going.
recent. So,
Like the
And
Maltese Falcon, or
That would
and
be
Death on the
appropriate for
Nile,
today.
or
Let's start off with Maltese Falcon,
Maltese Falcon.
and
In
Okay.
honor of the birthday.
yeah.
in honor of Dashiell Hammett.
okay.
All right, so
Okay.
a short rundown of the plot.
So break
Well,
us
we
down.
have the femme fatale in that. Bridget
Good.
O'Shaughnessy.
Okay, but
is-
let's start with the plot. What's the crime?
What's the crime? The crime is the murder of Sam Spade's partner, Miles Archer.
Yes.
and
So you start with that
investigator?
very soon.
Yes.
But we
Sam
have
Spade is the
already
private
met the instigator of the crime, the Bridget O'Shaughnessy, who also goes by several other names, who comes into the office and says that she wants her sister found. Her sister has disappeared, she says, and she's trying to locate her there in the city of San Francisco.
So that's the hiring scene that I always see in things.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
That's where that starts.
There's got to be some
They walk in
instigating
my office,
thing.
legs up to
Yeah.
whatever.
Now, if it's a
exactly.
police officer as opposed to that, sometimes the instigating scene is walking into the crime scene versus being hired.
Right.
But for the private detective, that's one of the tropes, cliches, the detective being hired.
So with the police detective,
heavy
then it's
lines
I
and
get to the
slant
crime
play.
scene and I have someone give me a rundown of what happened.
Yeah,
That's usually the case. Yes.
often.
Case.
Yes.
Yes. Pun was intended.
All right. So then you have the private investigator. He has his own office and everything.
Yes.
His own place.
Well, he has the office with Miles.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's now his own
Which-
office, one tier.
And
Okay.
you got the jaded aspect to the character, which he's very jaded. For example, he is having an affair with Miles's wife.
Who
Widow.
he doesn't even like, and Miles
Yeah,
doesn't either.
Yeah.
But there you are.
Oh my goodness. All right. So continue. Please.
So there are various sidelights to all of this that complicate things, and that is, I think, a trope in its own. Is there going to be other life complications for whoever is solving the mystery? They will have families that they have to deal with, or lovers, or diseases, or
Is it a trope for those things to come in at a vital moment in the crime in order to bogged down and
That's
make
often-
him choose.
That's often the
Mhm.
secondary plot comes into that.
Uh-huh.
And this is, I'm guessing, specific to more
Hard-boiled.
hard-boiled novels than like Sherlock Holmes short stories.
Not necessarily,
Which
because one would throw
don't
into that
tend to have
is another
things thrown in
aspect to it. In the hard-boiled, as well as Sherlock Holmes and so forth, is the cops tend to be somewhat incompetent.
That's a trope as well.
Yeah, that's
yes.
the trope. And
Yeah.
they end up following the private eye to solve the crime.
But
They always
denying
get
him.
But
or
denying
her.
he had anything
Yes.
to do with it, solving
Yes.
it.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
So it gets more and more complicated, of course.
Oh, and by the way, in the cozies, for instance, this type of thing happens too, but what the complications are usually relate to, oh, could that be the motive for them being the guilty party?
Okay.
So if so, with the incompetent cops, is kind of a corruption of the general law enforcement or whatever.
It's the
or
reason that
the
detectives
corruption
necessary.
of authority. Is that, would you consider that a trope in mystery?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
whether it's a
also-
lawman or a politician or
judge.
something like that.
Also, it serves as really good conflict because the police keep hassling, say, Sam Spade. They keep coming to his house in the middle of the night and talking to him.
Yeah,
But they
2 in the
happen to
morning.
be there
What?
at a good time.
Of course
too.
I'm awake to talk to you.
So they're hampering justice.
Yes.
Yes.
Not always. Sometimes
They're
they're
hampering
just. There's the other
The cops
thing.
are hampering justice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're just not all that good at their job, but they know that the private detective's their best shot at advancing themselves or their own career, and they
That's
might even
true.
like the private detective, so they might be passing them information.
And that's a trope that John Lutz uses in a lot of his newer series of books, of thrill, where the character is going out and catching serial killers. Is really the person coming to him is advancing their career. Back to Maltese Falcon.
Okay, well, we have a
Go ahead.
MacGuffin.
Ah,
As
MacGuffin.
you've heard of Hitchcock's MacGuffins,
Yes.
which
We
is
need a
the
definition
thing
of
that
MacGuffin.
you're after,
Yes.
the key to it
It's
all,
the-
which of course is the
The
multi.
character's
I heard it
character, but the reader
described-
doesn't.
I heard it described as the thing with the most thingness.
Yes, that's good. The thing
Yeah,
with the most thing is
The MacGuffin is something in which the characters all care about, and really the reader or viewer, if you're watching a movie, we could care less.
The value isn't in the object itself, it's
Right.
in the fact that everyone wants it.
Exactly.
It's the thing with the most thingness that's going to be important at the end.
It drives the plot.
Yes.
yes, and that of course in the Maltese Falcon is the Maltese Falcon.
It could be the motive for all the murders.
Yes.
It often
is.
the MacGuffin isn't always the motive for all the murders. Sometimes there are multiple motives.
Sometimes it's the red herring.
Yes,
That's
red
true.
herrings is another trope.
Yes, it is.
That comes from 10 Little Indians, doesn't it?
Yes.
I
know
think it's older
one.
than that, but that's in there.
Yeah, but
That's
there's-
where I learned about it as
Another-
a child.
That's me too.
Another trope, sticking with Maltese Falcon, we talked about the femme fatale being in there.
Yes.
The femme fatale is actually often becomes a love interest and also is related to, if not actually the criminal that's involved in the case.
Stab to the heart.
Stab-
Worst part possible time.
Yeah, which is another reason why love doesn't exactly really work out too well in the hard-boiled detectives.
Yeah.
Now, hard-boiled is where you find femme fatales. Cozies almost never have femme fatales. Occasionally they do, but seldom.
It wouldn't be fatale so much in a cozy, would it?
Exactly. Sometimes the romantic person ends up being the killer. So technically, you could kind of stretch the definition to include her.
Or him.
Or, well, yeah, but femme fatale implies female.
Yeah.
Going back to the earlier trope that, and this is a perfect example in the Maltese Falcon, Sam Spade, that Fedora was talking about, is that the detective works with his own code of honor, but he won't break. You see this in Spencer for Hire, you see it in Walter Mosley's Easy Rawlins stories, and so forth. There's always a code there.
But occasionally, there's two parts of the code that comes into conflict, so he has
That's
to
true.
choose between them.
That's true. But also, too, unlike where the politician's able to corrupt the police system, it's not so easy to corrupt the hard-boiled detective. They try to, and that's where quote unquote justice meets the road, if you will. And sometimes that justice is very six-gunned, shall we say?
Well, you'll notice that their code is very unique. It is quite personal. In the Maltese Falcon, for example, he does not have any qualms about lying to the police, obstructing justice, He does all kinds of those things. So he works outside of the law on many levels, but when it gets down to his code, that he will not break, no matter what the cost.
So he's a bit of a vigilante.
Oh, yes, I definitely that.
Yeah, I just finished reading a book, and it's not exactly a mystery, but point is, she was complaining about her uncle bugging her apartment, or somebody bugging her. It's like, hey, that's her uncle is a police officer. It's like, hey, that's illegal, and her uncle says, everything you do every day is illegal, which isn't quite true. But the point is, they both are technically good characters, but they're both breaking, at the very least, technically breaking the law.
You gotta do what you gotta do to get the man.
Well, yeah.
Totally jogged my memory. I was trying to think of her name. I had a gigantic Mary Higgins Clark face. And I blanked on her name, but yeah, one of the things that I was trying to remember tropes from there was always, the villain, whoever had done the actual crime, you met them.
Yes, you have to meet them in the
Yes.
first half of the book. That's
You met
break
them?
that rule at your peril in a mystery.
You meet them early. You either are suspicious or you're not, but if you are, there are going to be red herrings everywhere because you're not supposed to still think it's them by the time it's found out.
Right.
There was a harrowing scene at the end somewhere where, the heroine almost got killed and stuff happened to not just reveal to her who it was, but like everyone else.
This is sort of a Mark Hammer kind of thing that you're talking
Mike
about.
Hammer. That's what I was trying to think of earlier.
There have to be lots and lots of fights. And of course, in real life, people would get killed in those fights or be put in the hospital for months. And our hero, of course, or heroine, gets out, in half an hour.
Even from being buried alive.
Exactly.
Always something
Exactly.
fun. Never just a shootout.
So that is a trope, too.
See, this is where paranormal mystery has the advantage because you can just explain how they recover so quickly because they have supernatural powers.
Well, yeah. And, oh my goodness, paranormal.
But paranormal mystery is actually quite popular now. I guess
It certainly is.
Yes.
because I guess paranormal is quite popular now.
Patricia
So
Brooks' Mercy Thompson series, the
Yeah.
Anita Blake series by Laurel K. Hamilton.
Well, one thing about mystery is like with romance, it appears in all other different genres.
yeah.
Yes, at least a taste of it does, certainly.
Oh yeah, mysteries often have a romance, but I would say they have romantic elements, especially if it's a hard-boiled. It seldom has a happy ending. Occasionally they do, but it's more often than not, they're, don't end up happily ever after. They might not end up dead or separated, or, she might not be the femme fatale, but,
But the romance isn't the point of the story. So
Right.
much as
Right.
the mystery, the crime, the solving.
Now, it could be his girlfriend has been accused of the murder, or boyfriend has been locked up for the murder, and you have to free them.
Oh, can we get into that? Like the people who aren't actually police officers or private detectives, the ones who are just thrust into
Amateur-
The
Yeah,
amateur
yeah.
detectives.
Amateur
Or
sleuths.
Wrong Man. And so there's another version of that called The Wrong Man,
What is that one?
which is, and Hitchcock was especially known for doing this in all his films, is the person who is still an amateur detective, but the wrong man is somebody who is thought to be someone else and ends up being brought into the crime. North by Northwest, for example, the main character is mistaken identity for someone else in it that they were trying to, what was it, a spy of some kind? I don't remember exactly, even though I know the story. But anyway, he's mistaken. He ends up being kidnapped by the bad guys and ends up being dragged into the middle of this big mystery and adventure.
Speaking of which, that's kind of the Jack Reacher. A whole lot of his novels kind of start out with the wrong man trope, even though he clearly isn't the wrong man. I mean, he has a detective background, but, he gets kidnapped because he's in the wrong place at the wrong time, or they mistake his identity for someone else, or,
Funny thing is, you say wrong place at the wrong time, but it turns out to be wrong for the criminals in the
Exactly!
No. To all the criminals out there, be careful who you kidnap. Make sure to check IDs very carefully, otherwise you could end up behind bars.
No.
Please
This is
end up
Jack
behind
Reacher.
bars.
They'd end up dead.
I was trying to be nice. Kids might be listening.
Let's see here. I'm going to call it the anti-trope. Meaning the thing that it's still a trope, but it's something you can never do is in mystery. Such as killing a...
Cat or dog.
You can't
can-
kill a
you
dog
can-
in a mystery?
No, you can have a body count that rivals your biggest serial killer, but don't you dare harm.
You can kill babies. You just can't kill.
Yeah, you just
I
don't harm
had
a
no
dog like
idea
that.
that was a thing. I feel like animals die constantly in media, but in mysteries, it's not smiled upon.
So in horror, then you can kill all the dogs you want. Stephen King, why?
Is that why they make it
hurts.
horror? Is that what pushes it into
Partly.
horror? Is when they start
Apparently.
killing innocent animals?
Yeah, but it is a major trope. Apparently, I was reading a book, I don't remember who was the writer, but it was a nonfiction book he was writing about mystery. And he said he had one time where he had a cat killed off screen, mind you. It was just talked about. It didn't show up on screen. He got so many complaints from his readers about that.
Yes.
I signed up for human homicide, and you killed this animal, and I am very disappointed in
Yeah,
you.
oh, and you have to be very careful about hurting children in books. It's
sure.
not an absolute no, but for instance, you can't kill a kid in a cozy.
Well, I'm
You
sure
can
it's a
kidnap
lot
them, but you
like
can't kill them.
I'm sure it's a lot like romance in that there are degrees of heat, quote unquote, when it comes to a mystery. Who is vulnerable?
All
Like
the-
a hard-boiled, I imagine no one is safe there.
All the way up to Spatterpunk.
Again,
Spatterpunk?
Spatterpunk. That's blood on every page.
Well, it sounds like a
pretty much.
Tarantino movie.
Yeah.
Except for in the written form. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I was gonna mention that in some of the thrillers I've read, there has been, you meet the protagonist, but the first person, I guess, you actually see through the eyes of is the murderer. So you kind of follow their journey without knowing who they are as they're about to kill
I think
someone.
you're going
again.
into thrillers there rather than
Yeah.
mystery. Than
How,
straight mystery.
how do you
And-
That's
like
kind
to?
of-
How do you break it between
Yeah, 'cause,
mystery
like,
and
it is a-
thriller?
there
I think
is an
that's
overlap.
one of
Yeah.
the things that you have a sympathetic view of this guy who does all kinds of
Oh, sometimes
dreadful
it's not even
things.
sympathetic.
Yeah,
it's a
it's
way
just-
to
well,
keep
Like,
the.
the time is counting down.
It's like it's a whodunit, but some of the scenes are from the point of view of the killer. But since it's a book, you don't know who the killer is,
Yep.
or because it's through the
Right.
killer's eyes, you know what they're thinking.
But that makes you like them, presumably, or
Not
identify
always.
with
Well,
them a bit.
The point is that they're putting the reader in the killer's shoes.
Yeah. Right.
Whether or not it's supposed to identify with the killer, but you're seeing it from their point of view, and you're making the killer personal to you because you've read from their point of view.
Well, that's only one form of a thriller. You do have your other thrillers out there. You get your spy thrillers. That doesn't follow the line you're doing. James Bond.
James Bond was so stupid, though.
Well, in the
I mean,
book, in the
really,
book,
you
in the
just-
book
I just hear
or
pop,
the movie.
you
He
can't-
had to be
Just everything.
brilliant to get out of it, but he got in the
Oh, yeah.
dumbest situations.
Yes, this
It's
is
the hubris that does that to you.
To be fair, he is a protagonist in a book. That's going to happen. It doesn't matter how smart you are. We are going to make you suffer.
It's like a disease
Oh,
being a
we
protagonist.
probably already
like a
mentioned
curse.
this, but again, especially with the amateur killers, the amateur detectives, especially in a series, wherever they show up, crime happens.
Yep. Final thing I would say about the thrillers, back into that real quick, because we are running out of time, is another version of a thriller is the courtroom thriller. That usually you don't see the murderer right off the bat. With that, we like the science fiction one. We could keep going with this story, and who knows, we might at a later
We
time.
might need a part 2 for this.
Yes. But with that, let me go ahead and. Do you have any final things? Being our resident super
Sum up
I
mystery
cross
genre
genres.
for us.
The mystery genre. Well, it is my favorite. It is what I write, and I think if a book doesn't have some mystery, that I don't want to read it. Just plain don't want to read it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to add one thing. Mystery gets picked on a lot with being where science fiction is more of a futuristic. Let's be the hopeful kind, and mystery. Oh, that's for those who can't expand their imagination. I just remind you where the heck Sherlock Holmes crosses both lines, as well as other mysteries.
I was thinking about something that Melanie said, romantic elements. I think a lot of things they don't only have romantic elements, but they have mystery elements in them too. A lot of stories that aren't necessarily mysteries.
Yes.
Like, who is making this thing happen that is very strange that we don't know what's going on?
Well, and Fedora mentioned Silas Marner. That's not a mystery, but it has mystery in it.
Yes.
Wrinkle in Time is it.
Well,
And-
everything has discovery.
There.
That's what a story is discovering a plot.
If you want to know more about mysteries, check out the Mystery Writers Association. I believe they have got a breakdown on their website. At least they used to. Or if you want to also check out from your local library any books on how to write mysteries, and that will break down some more of the topics and subgenres of the mystery realm.
Oh, and by the way, mysteries are very hard, but not impossible to pants. Mysteries are mostly for plotters. Mostly. Not completely.
And of course, you can join Sisters in Crime, which is all about mystery writing. And we have a great chapter right here in St. Louis that I just happen to be the president of. And so check us out online and come to our meetings. We'd love to have you.
And if you're a male who writes mysteries, yes, the Sisters in Crime have their brothers as well.
Misters and sisters, we're not sexist.
And thank you for listening. Theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her. Right Pack Radio would like to thank STL Books for allowing us to record in their office. STL Books is a online bookstore specializing in new and used high-quality literature, children's books, and books written by or about St. Louis. Please visit them online at www.stlbooks.com or find their store on the Amazon.com website.